Prepare to enter the darkest corners of the human soul, where reality surpasses fiction in cruelty and mystery. We will explore 7 iconic cases, each a window into the minds of ruthless criminals and the relentless pursuit of justice. Buckle up, for the journey will be long, disturbing, and unforgettable. 1. The Phantom of the Zodiac, encrypted terror on the streets of San Francisco. 1.1. Summer of Love turns into Season of Fear. In 1968, San Francisco pulsated with the spirit of the Summer of Love, a cultural melting pot of music, freedom, and hope. But in the city's shadows, a malevolent force stirred, ready to stain the hippie utopia with blood. In December of that year, the peace was brutally shattered. David Faraday, 17, and his girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were found shot to death on a secluded road near Vallejo. The crime, brutal and seemingly motiveless, shocked the community. Little did they know this was just the first chapter in a nightmare that would haunt California for years to come. 1.2. Macabre Letters and Undecipherable Codes. The Killer Who Loved to Play. Months later, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau, were attacked in a parking lot. Darlene succumbed to her injuries, but Mike, despite being seriously wounded, survived to tell the tale of a mysterious man who approached them without a word. The commotion attracted media attention, but what transformed the case into a national obsession was a series of letters the killer, calling himself Zodiac, sent to local newspapers. The letters, written in a bizarre style and riddled with misspellings, contained details of the crimes and cryptic messages that, according to the Zodiac, would reveal his identity. The hunt had begun. 1.3. Deciphering the Zodiac's Mind. A game of cat and mouse with the police. The police faced a complex puzzle. The Zodiac did not fit any known serial killer profile. Intelligent and meticulous, he seemed to enjoy toying with the investigation, sending red herrings, messages encoded with different ciphers, and even a piece of a blood-soaked shirt from one of his victims. Each new attack, each new letter, increased the panic and frustration. The shadow of the Zodiac hung over San Francisco like a curse, a constant reminder of the vulnerability of those who crossed his path. 1.4. A legacy of fear and mystery. The enigma remains. Despite the efforts of the police and amateur investigators, the Zodiac was never caught. Theories about his identity have multiplied over the years, fueling books, documentaries, and endless speculation. Arthur Lee Allen, a teacher with a dark past, was the prime suspect for many years, but the evidence was never conclusive. The Zodiac, with his mask and his obsession with codes and riddles, became an urban legend, a symbol of the inexplicable evil that haunts the human mind. His legacy of fear and mystery remains alive, a reminder that the search for truth can be a labyrinth with no exit. 2. The Twisted Game of BTK. 3 Decades of Terror in Wichita. 2.1. The Beginning of the Nightmare. A family destroyed, a city in panic. January 15, 1974. The quiet city of Wichita, Kansas, awoke to shocking news. An entire family, Joseph and Julie Otero and their 2 young children, were found brutally murdered in their own home. The crime, marked by brutal and seemingly gratuitous violence, shocked the community. Authorities encountered a scene that defied human understanding, an act of such extreme cruelty that it indicated the presence of a monster on the loose. 2.2. Letters from Hell. The macabre signature of BTK. Months after the Otero family massacre, an anonymous letter arrived at the newsroom of the local newspaper, the Wichita Eagle. It contained disturbing details of the crime, information only the killer would know. In cold and calculating language, the author of the letter boasted about the murders, describing in morbid detail the suffering of his victims. His signature, a chilling acronym, BTK, bind, torture, kill. The message was clear. Evil had found its voice, and Wichita became hostage to a nightmare with no end. 2.3. Calculated Terror. A sadistic game of cat and mouse. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, BTK terrorized Wichita. New victims, men and women, young and old, seemingly chosen at random. With each new attack, the same brutal signature, the same coldness in the execution. The BTK, always one step ahead of the police, seemed to enjoy the terror he caused, sending poems, photos of the crime scenes, even a sketch of what would be his next attack. The city lived in a constant state of alert, fear infiltrating every corner, every unknown face. 2.4. Unsettling silence. The monster hides in the shadows. After a period of intense activity, BTK disappeared. The silence, however, was more frightening than the attacks. Had he died? Moved? Or was he just waiting for the opportune moment to strike again? The 1990s and 2000s brought technological advances, new tools in the fight against crime. But the specter of BTK continued to hover over Wichita, an open wound on the city's psyche. 2.5. The return of the Phantom, the arrogance that led to capture. In 2004, the silence was finally broken. A new wave of letters and sinister packages began arriving at Wichita newspapers and police stations. BTK was back, hungry for attention, eager to relive his crimes and show the world he was still in control. But this time, he made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the persistence of those who swore to stop him. In February 2005, thanks to a combination of traditional investigation, advanced DNA technology, and BTK's own arrogance, the mask finally fell. 2.6. Dennis Rader, the face of everyday evil. The world watched in shock as BTK's identity was revealed. Dennis Rader, a seemingly ordinary family man, an active member of the Lutheran Church, and a city employee. The man who terrorized Wichita for 3 decades was the friendly neighbor, the father who took his children to school, the exemplary citizen who hid a monstrous secret. Rader's arrest did not erase the suffering he caused, but it brought a sense of justice, an end to the nightmare that haunted generations in Wichita. 3. Ted Bundy, the killer heartthrob who charmed to kill. 3.1. A promising young man, the mask of normality. In the mid-1970s, the name Ted Bundy became synonymous with terror and morbid fascination. But before being unmasked as one of the most ruthless serial killers in American history, Bundy was a charming, intelligent, and ambitious young man. A law student, he worked on a suicide prevention hotline and engaged in social causes, earning the sympathy and trust of everyone around him. No one suspected that behind the facade of a good guy hid a cold and calculating predator, capable of committing acts of unimaginable brutality. 3.2. The hunt begins, mysterious disappearances and a disturbing pattern. Bundy's trail of terror began to take shape in the early 1970s, with a series of mysterious disappearances of young women in the northwestern United States. The victims, mostly attractive college students with dark hair, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a terrified community and a puzzle that baffled the police. The lack of evidence and the apparent randomness of the crimes hampered the investigation, allowing Bundy to continue his macabre killing spree undetected. 3.3. The allure of evil, irresistible charm, and a game of manipulation. Bundy possessed a secret weapon, his charm. He used his intelligence, good looks, and smooth talking to lure his victims, feigning fragility, posing as a police officer or firefighter, taking advantage of the goodwill of young women who would never suspect they were face to face with a monster. He would take them to secluded locations, where he would unleash his murderous rage. The cruelty of the crimes shocked even seasoned investigators. Brutal assaults, torture, mutilation, and necrophilia were all part of Bundy's macabre repertoire. 3.4. Daring escapes and a media frenzy. Bundy's capture in 1975, after a harrowing police chase, seemed to be the end of the line for the serial killer. But they underestimated Bundy's intelligence and audacity. In a cinematic act, he managed to escape from prison not once, but twice, keeping authorities on high alert and terrorizing the country with the possibility that he would return to killing. Recaptured in 1978, Bundy became the center of one of the most highly publicized trials in American history. With a mixture of arrogance and charm, he represented himself in court, turning the trial into a stage to feed his ego and shock the world with the coldness of his accounts. 3.5. Chilling confessions and a legacy of terror. Sentenced to death for his heinous crimes, Bundy spent years on death row, playing cat and mouse with authorities, revealing details of his crimes in exchange for stays of execution. His confessions, filled with disturbing details about the extent of his violence and the coldness of his methods, shocked and intrigued the world, fueling a morbid fascination with the killer heartthrob. Ted Bundy's story transcended the crime pages, becoming a chilling warning about the complex nature of evil and the fragility of human life. 4. The case of Casey Anthony, the accused mother and the enigma of lost innocence. 4.1. A mysterious disappearance, the anguished search for little Kaylee. Orlando, Florida, summer 2008. Little Kaylee Anthony, a girl of just 2 years old, disappears without a trace. Her parents, Casey and George Anthony, appear devastated by their daughter's disappearance, but something in Casey's demeanor, young and seemingly more concerned with hanging out with friends than looking for her missing daughter, raises suspicions from the police and the media. The search for Kaylee turns into a media circus, with the Anthony family at the center of a hurricane of speculation and accusations. 4.2. Lies, contradictions, and a macabre odor, the evidence pointing to Casey. As the investigation progressed, a web of lies, contradictions, and suspicious behavior began to form around Casey Anthony. She lied to the police about her whereabouts, made up outlandish stories about nannies and kidnappings, and seemed more concerned with preserving her freedom than finding her daughter. The discovery of the family car, with a foul odor reminiscent of decomposing flesh, heightened suspicions that Kaylee might be dead and that her own mother was involved in the crime. 4.3. A media trial, America captivated by a family enigma. In 2011, 3 years after Kaylee's disappearance, Casey Anthony finally went on trial, charged with first-degree murder. The case, which had already captivated the nation's attention, turned into an unprecedented media spectacle. Television cameras broadcast the trial live, body language experts analyzed Casey's every gesture, and public opinion was divided between those who believed in her guilt and those who saw her as the victim of a miscarriage of justice. 4.4. Circumstantial evidence and the shadow of doubt, a shocking verdict. The prosecution presented a case based on circumstantial evidence. Casey's suspicious behavior, the lies, the odor in the car, internet searches for terms like how to make chloroform and suffocation. But the defense argued that there was no concrete evidence linking Casey to her daughter's murder, pointing to the lack of DNA and the possibility of an accident. After weeks of trial and hours of deliberation, the jury reached a shocking verdict: not guilty on the most serious charges, including murder. 4.5. Justice or system failure, a case that divides opinions to this day. Casey Anthony's acquittal caused national outrage. Crowds protested outside the courthouse, outraged at what they considered a grave injustice. On social media, the fury was even greater, with millions of people expressing their revolt and perplexity. The case, which divided America, raised complex questions about the role of the media in the courts, the limits of the presumption of innocence, and the search for justice in an often flawed system. 5. The enigma of Amelia Earhart vanished in the Pacific Heights. 5.1. The Lone Eagle, a woman challenging the skies and prejudices. Amelia Earhart, a name that evokes adventure, courage, and the pioneering spirit of aviation. At a time when women were often relegated to secondary roles, Amelia dared to challenge the skies and prejudices, becoming one of the most famous aviators in the world. Her extraordinary feats, including the solo transatlantic flight in 1932, inspired generations and made her a feminist icon. But in 1937, at the height of her career, Amelia disappeared mysteriously during an attempt to circumnavigate the globe, leaving behind a legacy of mystery and speculation that endures to this day. 5.2. The risky mission, circling the globe in pursuit of a dream. Aboard her Lockheed Electra 10E, a twin-engine aircraft specially adapted for the long journey, Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Oakland, California, on May 20, 1937. The goal was ambitious: to fly around the world along the equator, the longest possible route, a challenge that would test the limits of human endurance and the technology of the time. Accompanied by a ground crew that monitored their progress via radio, Amelia and Noonan faced storms, mechanical failures, and the accumulated fatigue of thousands of miles over oceans and continents. 5.3. Interrupted signals. The anguish increases in the Pacific. After weeks of flight, the epic journey was nearing its end. On July 2, 1937, after completing almost two-thirds of the route, Amelia and Noonan took off from La, New Guinea, bound for Howland Island, a small atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The leg was crucial, one of the longest and most dangerous stretches of the expedition. Weather conditions were challenging, with dense clouds and reduced visibility. Radio communication became increasingly difficult, with interference and garbled messages. 5.4. Eerie silence. The desperate search for a sign of life. The anguish increased with each passing hour. The last message received from Amelia, in a tone of apprehension, indicated that they were lost and low on fuel. From then on, silence. The U.S. Coast Guard launched a massive search, the largest maritime rescue operation ever undertaken up to that time. Ships and aircraft scoured thousands of square miles of the Pacific Ocean, hoping to find some sign of Amelia, Noonan, or the wreckage of the Electra. 5.5. Mystery in the depths, endless theories and speculation. Despite Herculean efforts, no concrete trace of Amelia, Noonan, or the Electra was ever found. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart became one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, fueling conspiracy theories, speculations, and expeditions in search of the truth. Was it an accident, human error, mechanical problems, or did Amelia and Noonan meet an even more mysterious fate, lost on a remote island, captured by some unknown tribe, or, who knows, victims of a government conspiracy? 5.6. A legacy of courage and mystery. The fascination remains. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart continues to intrigue and fascinate the world. Several expeditions have been organized over the decades, using increasingly advanced technologies, hoping to unravel the mystery and uncover the truth about the aviator's fate. To this day, new clues emerge, new theories are proposed, but the enigma remains. Amelia Earhart may be gone, but her legacy of courage, daring, and mystery lives on, inspiring the imagination and fueling the human desire to unravel the secrets the world insists on hiding. 6. Jack the Ripper, terror in the darkness of London. 6.1. Night mist, sinister shadows. Terror spreads through Whitechapel, London, 1888. The capital of the British Empire, vibrant and imposing, hid within its bowels a dark and dangerous side, especially in the dark alleys and labyrinthine lanes of Whitechapel, a poor and degraded district in London's East End. It was there, under the cover of night and the dense fog that enveloped the city, that a nightmare came to life. A nightmare that went by the name of Jack the Ripper. 6.2. Forgotten victims, unspeakable brutality. The signature of evil. Jack's victims were women, mostly prostitutes, marginalized by society and forgotten in the dark alleys of Whitechapel. Their names, once ignored, would become synonymous with terror and mystery. Marion Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Each murder was more brutal than the last, marked by grotesque mutilations that indicated a deep hatred and an animalistic coldness. 6.3. Letters from Hell, macabre taunts, and a game of red herrings. As the murders continued, panic gripped Whitechapel and spread throughout the city. The police, pressured by public opinion and the sensationalist press of the time, found themselves facing a terrifying enigma. Who was Jack the Ripper? Anonymous letters, written in a mocking tone and signed with the name Jack the Ripper, arrived at newspaper offices and police stations, taunting authorities with gruesome details of the crimes and promises of new murders. 6.4. Human Hunt. A city in panic, an untamable ghost. London was transformed into a stage of terror, with the population in panic and the police conducting frantic searches for any clue that would lead to the killer's whereabouts. There was no shortage of suspects. Doctors, butchers, artists. all became targets of speculation and theories. But Jack the Ripper was a ghost who moved masterfully through the shadows, disappearing without a trace, one step ahead of those who tried to capture him. 6.5. The mystery persists, a legacy of terror and intrigue. The last murder attributed to Jack the Ripper occurred in November 1888. After the death of Mary Jane Kelly, the killer seemed to disappear as mysteriously as he had appeared. The identity of Jack the Ripper has never been discovered, despite numerous theories and investigations over the decades. His reign of terror in the streets of Whitechapel became a macabre legend, a chilling reminder that darkness can lurk in the most unexpected corners of the human soul. 7. The Shadow Hunter, unraveling the mystery of the Golden State Killer. 7.1. Terror in California, a wave of brutal crimes that paralyzed a state. Beginning in the mid-1970s, the state of California, known for its natural beauty and laid-back lifestyle, was gripped by a wave of terror that left entire communities in panic. A relentless predator, who terrorized his victims before attacking them, was on the loose. He broke into homes in the middle of the night, tied up and gagged the occupants, raped the women, and often murdered his victims with shocking brutality. 7.2. The Phantom of California, a trail of crimes that defied justice for decades. At first, the crimes were treated as isolated incidents. But as the number of attacks increased and the modus operandi was repeated, with increasingly disturbing acts of cruelty, it became clear that it was the work of a single perpetrator, a cold and calculating individual who chose his victims carefully, studied their habits, and psychologically terrorized them before attacking. Police dubbed him the East Area Rapist, but as time went on, as his crimes became increasingly violent, he became known as the original Night Stalker and, finally, the Golden State Killer. 7.3. False leads, dead ends, the frustration of an endless hunt. For decades, police pursued the Golden State Killer without success. Clues appeared and disappeared like smoke. Witnesses described a masked man with a calm voice and a local accent, but his identity remained a mystery. Composite sketches, fingerprint collection, DNA analysis, nothing seemed to work. The Golden State Killer was a phantom haunting California, leaving behind a trail of pain, fear, and the frustration of a justice system that seemed unable to stop him. 7.4. Science as a weapon, DNA, genealogy, and the search for the missing link. With the advancement of DNA technology in recent decades, hope for finally unraveling the mystery of the Golden State Killer was renewed. DNA samples collected from the crime scenes were entered into criminal databases, but the results were always inconclusive. It was then that, in 2018, investigators decided to use a new tool, genetic genealogy. By comparing the Golden State Killer's DNA with genetic profiles available in public databases, police were able to locate distant relatives of the killer. 7.5. Unmasking the monster, a shocking end to a long nightmare. Starting with the discovery of distant relatives, investigators reconstructed the Golden State Killer's family tree, narrowing down the number of suspects until they came to a name: Joseph James D'Angelo Jr., a former police officer who had worked in the same region where the crimes occurred. After weeks of surveillance and collecting discarded genetic material from D'Angelo, police finally had the confirmation they needed. In April 2018, more than 40 years after his crime spree began, the Golden State Killer was arrested. 7.6. Justice delayed, relief and outrage. A case that made criminal history. The news of Joseph James D'Angelo Jr.'s arrest sent shockwaves across the United States. The man who terrorized California for so many years was a member of law enforcement, someone who had sworn to protect society. The Golden State Killer case became a landmark in criminal history, demonstrating the power of science and persistence in the fight against crime, but also exposing the flaws in the system and the fragility of justice in a world where evil often hides under the mask of normalcy.